Thank you for coming to this afternoon session. Final one for the day, so we've had fun so far. This seems to be quite a promising turnout. We do currently have 4 people presenting, but Geraldine has also got Mark with her. So it's both of those there. So we'll just go down the line. I'll introduce you to who's here currently, and then we'll get on with the presentations and then a little bit of a discussion. So for those who weren't in the previous panel or haven't been to a panel, we will be using Slido. So the room is E948. So when you go onto Slido on the internet, you can type in that room and you'll be able to type in a question, anonymous or otherwise, and then we'll read those out and ask the questions for you. So starting closest to me, we've got Lucy Cooper from Sheffield Hallam Uni, a PhD student. Then we have Alyson Dodd from Northumbria Uni, academic researcher. We have Chris Newson from the student rooms. So that's a bit of a different perspective. So for those that don't know, that's like an online platform, I want to say. That's what I realised. And then we have Geraldine Dufour and Mark Fudge at the end. Geraldine is Uni of Cambridge and a professional services staff member. Yep. And Mark is University Kiel, isn't it? Right. Yes. So there we go. So I think I've covered everything I need to. So we'll just get straight on to presentations. So Alyson, you're first. Okay.
So when I submitted to present at the conference, I submitted my project looking at developing a measure of student quality of life, but as I'm part of the Smarten leadership team, and this is the Smarten conference, it feels like I should also talk a little bit about the Smarten measurement project, which has been measured a couple of times today, just to make you aware of it in case you have any questions in the panel discussion part. So we're kind of looking at a big scoping review of well-being measures used in students to understand how it's being conceptualised, how it's being measured, and alongside that running an online consultation of key stakeholders, including students, academics and researchers, professional services staff, and basically anyone working in higher education. So if you do want to know more about that, then you can obviously see that on our website and Twitter and so on, or ask questions in the panel discussion. What I'm actually presenting about today is a project that I've been working on with Nicola, looking at developing a measure specifically for students around quality of life. So you'll know that there are lots of quality of life measures out there, and I'm not really one to just add another measure into the mix, but there isn't one that captures what's important to students. So quality of life is typically thought to be very multidimensional and very contextual as well about a particular group of people. So we wanted to look at what's important to students when it comes to their quality of life. So I actually only have one slide, and what this captures is, we did some qualitative interviews with students at Northumbria University up in Newcastle and at KCL in London, and these were the themes that came through those interviews when we asked students, what is important to you when it comes to quality of life? So you'll see a lot of overlap between generic quality of life measures that already exist, things like relationships, having a support network, and spirituality and faith, and finances and so on. But then there are some things that are a bit more specific to students. So physical environment is something that also comes up with other populations as well, but this is very much focused around accommodation, who you're sharing with, the location of the university, the location of your halls or other accommodation, and things such as the future. So kind of the idea of quality of life being impacted by how much they felt like they were able to strive towards these future goals of importance to them and developing employability. And then, as is often the case when we do any research with students, kind of personal development and transitions came up as well, and that kind of, I'm becoming independent now, and for my quality of life it's important to me that that happens and that I feel able to do so. So this is kind of in a nutshell the health side of things as well, was kind of very focused on mental well-being, as you can imagine. But also, when it came to physical health, it was kind of more about fitness and diet, because they didn't seem that concerned by their health unless they had a long-term health condition. They didn't seem ultimately concerned about their health, and I guess that's probably because of the age group that students are generally in. And these were actually 18 to 25-year-old students that we interviewed. So we did a focus group just to kind of confirm that another group of students separate to those with interviews agreed that these all kind of made sense as themes and domains of quality of life of importance. And we're now working on actually co-producing a measure based around these themes and what our students in our co-production panel came up with to do some further work on. So it's quite introductory really, because we haven't finished yet. But I just thought it was quite interesting that these came out very strongly with the students we interviewed about domains of life for them that were important for them to have quality of life. And that's all I have to say about that today. But yeah, any questions at the end? Fine. Okay.
Thank you very much. Can confirm that they were all agreed upon in the session, because I attended that one with Alyson. So next we'll have Lucy.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me without?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm a PhD student at Sheffield Hallam University, but I've also spent about 10 or so years working supporting students in higher educational settings as a BACP accredited counsellor. Alongside my PhD, I also work up the road at University of Sheffield as a specialist mental health mentor, which not quite realising at the time, but actually has been extremely helpful in studying my PhD, looking at perfectionism, anxiety and wellbeing in UK undergraduates. Just to give you a quick overview about what my PhD is, it's kind of divided into three separate studies. The first one being a systematic literature review. I won't bore you with that. The second one was a survey, a very large survey. I got over 1,400 responses. And after cleaning it, we still have 1,100 responses that are good to go, which is quite overwhelming. And then study 3 was me developing, delivering and evaluating an intervention for students with perfectionism, specifically undergraduates. And that's what I'm probably going to talk to you a little bit more about today. For those that aren't aware, including myself when I actually took up the PhD, perfectionism, in a nutshell, was historically regarded as something that was very one-dimensional. Perfectionists were highly neurotic, they were dysfunctional, or as Horney would put it, were under the tyranny of the should. Not particularly nice traits to consider. However, in 1990, Frost and colleagues developed the multi-dimensional perfectionism scale, and they found that there were 6 different dimensions within perfectionism: concern over mistakes, personal standards, doubts about actions, and so forth. Also in the 1990s, Hewitt and Flett also created the multi-dimensional perfectionism scale, which has been a great frustration for perfectionism researchers, but regardless, they found 3 dimensions. And instead of kind of looking at different facets, Hewitt and Flett looked at more the orientation with regards to perfectionism. So whether it was something that was intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. Most importantly though, instead of perfectionism, well, when we look at these different dimensions across both scales, some of these are positively correlated with negative affect, suicidal ideation, anxiety and avoidance, and a whole host of other unhelpful or difficult traits for people to manage. However, other aspects were positively correlated with positive effects, satisfaction with life and achievement, in particular academic achievement. So bear in mind that instead of this one-dimensional construct, we're now thinking of perfectionism as being multi-dimensional, both helpful and unhelpful. How does this affect the student? When we think about our perfectionist students, some of these traits are potentially very helpful. Them being organised, highly motivated, focused, ambitious, having high personal standards of their work. So these traits are useful, but not to the detriment of their well-being. So my intervention looks to try and create something that's called a dual-factor model. Perfectionism is traditionally treated in a CBT manner, which is very helpful. It looks at lowering the unhelpful traits such as anxiety or excessive worry. But then I incorporated something called positive psychology interventions to try and help increase the good aspects or the helpful aspects, such as the ones on the right-hand side. For those that aren't aware, positive psychology is a new-ish movement within psychology that has responded to the traditional psychology, the clinical psychology, that whilst very helpful, it doesn't do very well at focusing on what it is that we do well. So positive psychology wants to look at more, instead of replacing it, we really want to complement it. How can we look at the positive aspects of ourselves? And this, I think, aligns perfectly with something like perfectionism that has both negative and positive traits. What's my point? Within my intervention, I use positive psychology interventions such as the character strengths, 3 good things, self-compassion exercises, and these all have quite a lot of efficacy. I've got a few references there. And I use positive psychology scales and measurements in my large data set. Just to give you a really brief overview, these are just some of the qualitative responses that I got from the students that finished my intervention literally last week, so this is hot off the press. On the right-hand side in particular, I really like these two. I have started becoming more compassionate with myself, focusing on what I did right or learnt from an experience rather than the ways I failed. I found that self-compassion and character strength particularly useful and helped provide insights that I had not considered or implemented previously. Now, this is just a really small cohort, is really realistically a pilot study, but if I go back to my initial point, when we're talking about measuring students' mental health, yes, there is a lot of value in the clinical models that provide us a wealth of information and really good treatments and interventions, but only focusing on that can potentially disempower students who maybe are already very well focused on their flaws or struggles. Thank you. I would like to advocate for a bit more of a positive psychology movement to complement and add alongside some of our existing interventions and measures. And I'm really out of time, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Up next we'll have Chris from Student Rooms.
Thank you very much. We'll go with that. Thank you. Yeah, hi. So, first off, I feel sort of slightly overwhelmed by being in the presence of all these academics. This is not my world, so be kind to me. And I'm not a mental health expert or practitioner either, and I'm going to controversially talk just about well-being in a room full of people who could argue for a long time that mental health and well-being are 2 completely different things. However, I am extremely excited by what we're up to at the student room at the moment, and hope that you'll find it a bit interesting, and maybe I can give a different take on some of the other topics. The student room, as discussed, is a big UK student community website. We look after students from the beginning of GCSE to the end of postgrad. We get about 10 million users a month. It's become a bit of an institution. Hopefully most of you have been on it. Over the last couple of years, we've seen the wellbeing surge that has been felt across schools and universities. And the year before we launched Alyson, we had 850 incidents that triggered our extreme self-harm or suicide protocols on the website, so more than 2 a day. So we wanted to act, and we've built this new company within the group, this new product called Enlightened, which, as you'll discover, does a bunch of things to support students with their well-being and their student engagement, as well as providing that data to universities so that the universities themselves can also improve student engagement and well-being. So, just so you understand where I'm coming from, this is how it works. You start top right corner, daily measurement of student engagement and well-being. So, first off, we've got an app for students, sits on their phones, and we've got a dashboard for universities to use. So 2 completely separate but joined products. This is how they come together. So we ask students every week a few questions. I'll talk more about what they are in a second. In the app, we also capture from students their ideas to improve the institution, and we enable students to crowdsource and sort all of those ideas. We then merge that together with student record data, all the demographics from everything from course to age to all the widening access criteria. That gets cleverly processed by our algorithms to give back to students really timely and targeted advice that's supporting them with exactly the problems that they are experiencing right now on their phones where they need it and turn to most. We then provide that information back to the institution, saying these are the areas where you have a well-being or a student engagement issue, and these are the prioritised student solutions for solving some of those issues. So you might have a problem in a halls of residence with well-being, or on a course with learning experience. Perhaps your students from less well-off backgrounds aren't feeling as connected. We'll spot those things and help come up with solutions for the universities. Then the Act communicates back to the students, so as the universities are acting on that information, the dialogue continues with the students, and then as interventions are made, you can monitor the impact of those interventions and see how effective they're being. So hopefully that helps you understand roughly how it works. In terms of what we're measuring, we've got 225 questions, 4 main scales: transitions, learning experience, feeling connected, and well-being. You can see the subscales and the number of questions within them over there on the right. And importantly, I want to advocate the WHO5 as well, the World Health Organization's short well-being index, which is a brilliant tool that I think is underused in the UK. It's short, it's really beautifully worded in a way that you can ask questions of a student population day in, day out, without anyone feeling like you're asking them difficult questions. It's hugely well validated and in lots of languages, and has clinical properties as well. So rather than something like the ONS score, which the OFS would prefer us to use, that wouldn't be any good for giving advice to students. So that's what we're measuring. And I guess if there's one sort of message I'd like to get across, if we don't measure the well-being of our student population regularly and over time, how can we understand where we've got problems and how can we do something about it? We go for the easy data in the number of people attending counselling sessions or people with reported mental health conditions. But what about the whole population? How are we getting on? Where are the problems? Let's try and stop them before they become significant. Just a few images of how the app works. We've tried to build something that will work well for Gen Z. It's something you can go to in the odd 5 minutes here or there. Oh gosh, I've got a finished flag already. So yeah, just to give you an indication of data, so we did 2 20-week pilots. Yeah, massive uptake. Really delighted that we're now up to 340,000 questions, 5,500 ideas submitted by students. They've been voted on 50,000 times. Great to be working with Northumbria just in the last couple of weeks on the Office for Students' Mental Health Challenge competition. We'll talk more about that later, and lovely to see that students are liking it. They're taking agency from it. They're making changes to their lives as a result. And also that institutions are welcoming the impact that this data set can have on changing student and university lives. Thank you.
Yeah. So up next we have Geraldine and Mark.
Hi everyone. So we both head the University Counselling Service, and we're going to talk to you about this practice research group that we're part of. So we are practitioners, and then we have one of our colleagues, Emma, going to stand up with the researchers doing all the number crunching and the sort of hard work and analysis. And keep it over here as well. Sorry. So this research group comes from a long-standing ambition in the sector to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of counselling. This is really particularly important because in the last year we had a number of counselling services that were closed, and people were wanting to sort of invest in mental health initiative, but they said that there were no evidence to demonstrate the effectiveness of counselling, which we argue against, but we thought, well, the best way really is to prove it. So we started working with colleagues and wanting to collect data from the counselling service in our university to be able to demonstrate that we are effective when we help students, and everybody's been talking about it today. There's been a huge increase in the number of people who access counselling. So for instance, in my institution we had 32% increase in people accessing counselling at the university service. And there is a big media narrative about the crisis in student mental health. I mean, this morning Nicholas started the presentation about saying, well, the fact that more people are coming to counselling, is that necessarily negative? Does it mean it's worse? Or does it just mean that we've done a good job, you know, there's less stigma and more people are coming to us? So we wanted to kind of have some hard data that we'd be able to analyse and report on.
Thank you. So if we backtrack slightly and we look at UK and US counselling services, in the United States, there's a research centre, CCMH, which is in Penn State University. They collate all the data from American counselling centres. They literally suck it up and they analyse huge data sets. If you think of every university in the US, or most, contributing data to this. So what they're looking at is trends and levels in distress that those students are presenting with, but perhaps crucially, you know, thinking about service demand and demographics. Who is going to a university counselling service in the States? And Ben Locke, who analyses this data, has been able to, you know, they publish reports every year and they can track over periods of time the changes in appointment times. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in the US, and he was talking about more and more services now having a need for rapid access slots. We would perhaps call them drop-in slots or emergency slots. So it's not just about the distress levels of students coming into services, but who are those students? Are they from specific groups? You know, we talked this morning around intersectionality, and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, in the UK, we have pockets of data. We don't have that uniform sample. You know, my service has been collecting data for a long time in paper. I'm sure the service here at Cambridge and many other services are collecting data. What we haven't done is pulled that all together and agreed the demographics, the standardised bit that might encapsulate that data and give us a greater picture and an understanding of what's happening in the UK. So there is no longitudinal study in the UK that is coherent and makes much sense. There are pockets of studies.
So we published our first paper in the summer, in July, so some of you, if you're interested, I've left a slide at the end of the presentation where you can look up. And basically in this paper, there's 6 of us from universities, and we're working with 3 researchers, so Emma at the SCP, Gemma at the SCP, and Michael Barkin, who's at the University of Sheffield. And we said, actually, when we look at these issues, we really want to have a lot of clarity. People brandied words of like mental health, well-being, there's no definition. We really want to be very clear on what we have. We also like to look at the transition from people coming into university, what happens to them, you know, the impact on their mental health. So we're calling for the sector really to give this information so that we all work together. And we start by doing a feasibility study.
So feasibility study, there were 6 universities. We got together, really interesting research journey. We naturally, you know, we sort of, I wouldn't say argued, but we collaborated, and it was quite intense in trying to get the data together and analyse it. We were able to do that, and we've just gone on to stage 2, which was, again, giving more data, and we've just made contact with I think we had responses from about 35 services across the UK who said they had electronic data and they wanted to be a part of this. So we're literally just bringing those guys on board. And what we were doing in that feasibility study was ironing out the problems that we were going to get around seeking ethical approval from our institutes, any problems that we had in uploading data, cleaning data, trying to get it as good as possible before we gave it to Emma and Michael.
So this is an example.
Yeah, so just to give you, we're running out of time. CCAPS is the form on the left-hand side. That's created by CCMH and by Penn State. It is just about students. It measures student distress. Okay? And This is the same student, so that's the student filling out some text, and the student filling out core OM, which is used both within higher education and across many, many sectors. It's used in secondary services, it's used in voluntary services as well. So that just gives you a picture. You perhaps can't see some of the text there, but I think we can talk about measures, but actually, you know, I know this student, and they really struggle with many, many things. And you can perhaps see that in the scoring on the very visual scoring on CCAPs on the left-hand side. But that's just to give you a flavour of the measures that we're using.
So, just the final slide before we finish. So this is the information that we collect. So we're looking at all the students who can be over 17 and 18. We want to know that, you know, whether they're home, EU or international students, their ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, their age, whether they have a display disability, which year they're in, and then whether they're part-time, full-time, or faculty for the degree. Because that is really important. At the moment, if you look at one institution, if there's more issues with a specific group of students, it's very difficult to know because there's not enough numbers, you don't have the power for statistic analysis. But when you have, at the moment, 5 universities, we've got over 5,000 students, the data from that MI is analyzing, and you can start to really notice trends, and you can see, you know, in terms of, for instance, BME students, or students who are part-time, students with disability, sexual orientation, the impact on the mental health of the students when they approach the counselling service and as they're receiving counselling. You know, is counselling working just as well for BME students or for LGBT plus students, for instance? This, when we have that data, we'll be able to tell you. So this is really quite groundbreaking that we're having all this information and working and collaborating together. And what's also really unusual is that it's a practitioners and researcher collaboration. So there's a lot of interactions between the two. And these are the people who are part of the research, and that's the reference if you are interested in the paper that was. So thank you very much.
We've got quite a few questions on Slido, so I'll go through those first, and then hopefully we'll have time to open it up to you guys. But if not, something on Slido, we can hopefully get them answered quicker around the time. I don't know. So first of all, we have: is there danger developing specific measures of student mental health, i.e., limit understanding seriousness of issues as related to relevant clinical thresholds? So does anybody want to go first on the answer?
Could you read that again?
Yes, of course. So, is there a danger developing specific measures of student mental health?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're finding in this smarten consultation is that a lot of the mental health measures that are used in students were developed for use in students and were developed in clinical populations, and that's why I think that your work is great looking at that measurement in much more detail. I actually focus much like yourself, more on well-being outcomes, with the idea being that mental health and well-being are distinct but very linked constructs. So for the student quality of life measure, for example, that would be a measure for all students, not for students who are having mental health difficulties, just to get an idea, to help universities to get an idea of where are their students finding that their quality of life is perhaps not so good, and what can the university do about that, and that can include things like, you know, provision of study places to go and such like. So not so much a mental health measure, much more kind of a well-being outcome. And our consultation and scoping review in Smarten is again ended up focusing a lot more on the well-being side of things, because that is for all students, and because of the difficulties and complexities with understanding how we can possibly track and measure student mental health in an appropriate way. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think specific measures can be, you know, tricky.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's really important to have some specific student outcome measure, because when we use, for instance, CCAPs, that's being developed particularly for students, we're able to see the impact on the academic performance, and I think that's the key thing. We were also really keen on looking at mental health rather than well-being for the counselling service, because we want to show if there's a certain level of distress for students, they need to have intervention that are targeting that level of distress. And you can't just stop them off with sort of well-meaning things. You know, if people are a certain level that is above what we call the clinical cutoff, then they really need intervention that are specific to their mental health needs. So that was the things that sort of motivated us really.
I think danger is perhaps a strong word, but the potential there to create one UK base very similar to CCMH, it could be huge. My worry is, at the moment, we could, because there's such a need for this, we could all go off in different directions using different measures. The reason why many counselling services use things like CCAPS and CORE and PhD9 and GAD7 is because they are statistically valid. They've been used in many services, and if need be, you know, we can look at, we can benchmark university counselling services with IAT or even secondary services or the voluntary sector. So there is potential there. Ideally, I think, you know, maybe in 10 or 15 years' time, we could have a UK equivalent of the American CCAPS measure. It would be brilliant. We could use it across every university in the UK. I think that there is the potential at the moment for us to all, you know, this is amazing that the work that this group is doing, but there is potential for us to all go off exploring different measures and just almost weaken our arguments rather than strengthening it.
Okay, so the next question is directed to you, Lucy. How did you manage to get such a large amount of responses for your survey, and how long was the survey completion time?
That's fine. In terms of how, I broadcast it. I labelled it as a National Student Wellbeing Survey across the UK, and I drew in a lot of help from a lot of friends. So I used to work at Leeds Beckett University, and the head of the services there sent it out to students, which I was very grateful for. My supervisor had good links within my own university, so it was sent out across all undergraduates. And initially I assumed that because it was being sent across, you know, via email to undergraduates, I wouldn't necessarily get a good response rate because they're inundated with emails. So to be honest, I don't really know how. I just did. And I can't remember the second part of the question was.
It was how long did it take to the completion time?
10 to 15 minutes. So I spent a long time trying to work out with my supervisors what would be the best measures that were going to be valid, reliable, good combat alpha and so forth. But we're going to be short as well in time. But I did have, I can't remember the list now, I think 9 different measures plus demographic questions, and then a few other extra bits in the end about social media. So there was quite a lot there. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
So this is, I think, across the board question, and it's got a lot of likes, so I'll ask it. Surveys are sadly victim to self-selection. How do we collect data from students that cannot or do not ordinarily submit surveys? Sort of links in with what you've just said there.
Yeah.
I was going to say if anyone's getting it.
I think this is a limitation of survey, and also the fact that people are more likely, for instance, to fill in survey if they have an issue, a mental health issue. That really skews the results. So you have other ways of sort of research on this. We did in the university counselling service with our colleagues in psychiatry, we did a random control trial for mindfulness, and we did need to do that. So we had to check that the students who were coming to see us, how different they were from the normal student population and how different they were from the people who were coming to counselling. But we only had the people who were interested in doing mindfulness in the first place. So I think there are limitations. It doesn't capture the whole of the student body. And we know, for instance, something that's asking us in one of the other sessions about, we look at people who come to counselling. We know, for instance, from all our services, we have less men coming to counselling than we have women. So that's going to, again, impact on the results that we have.
And I think we'll round it off with a final question. Time's running a bit low. So for Chris, do students always know what solutions or interventions might be best for them? And what about the problems with groupthink?
Yeah, good question, thanks. So what we don't do is say, if you put an idea forward, it will get implemented. What we enable is students to say, I think this is a good thing, and for other students to vote in support of it. To the groupthink point, we deliberately don't share with students the number of people who have voted on an idea until they've voted on it, because we wanted to make sure we avoided that groupthink problem. Yeah.
Right. I think that's us done for the session. So if you want to head out to where the tea, coffee, lunch was served earlier, we should have some tea and coffee again. And thank you very much to all of our panelists.